I served in World War II.
And what was your branch of service?
I was in the, officially I was in the 325th Tank Destroyer Battalion.
In the Army?
In the Army, yes.
And your highest rank?
The highest rank I achieved was Buck Sergeant.
Now, can you just kind of go briefly, without going into detail, we'll go into detail more later, but where you started your Army career and the places you went and where you ended it, where your career ended. Just kind of so we have an idea of the places you were, and then we'll get into each place and talk about what happened to those places.
Well, as everybody else did, we went to Fort Devens and we were there just a few days after induction. And then we took what we like to refer to as the trip from hell, because they put us on a train in Massachusetts, which originally, believe it or not, I was supposed to go to Mitchell Air Force in New York, which would have been a very, very short trip. However, the train, I think, was built in about 1868. It had to be. It was the filthiest, dirtiest locomotive train that you ever saw in your life. Once we got to New York, my orders got changed along with the orders of most of the people on the thing, and they told us we are now going to Camp Gruber, Oklahoma. The orders got changed in New York City, believe it or not. And we got on that train, and there was no water, no food, no mess train, no nothing. We traveled a good day and a half with I'm not kidding that this train was definitely built before even railroads were thought of, I think. They were part of the Stagecoach Express. And the coal and the air that came in through those windows, it wasn't long before we were covered in cinders. And we got to about out a day and a half or so, and the train pulled off into a station somewhere. We had no idea where we were, and they tried to get us some water because we hadn't had any water for 2 days. And they were not fortunate enough to get very much water, so they kept going and said, so they got to another spot where they were hoping they would at least get some food. So the second day went by, we had no water and no food. And continued to travel till we got to the Chicago stockyards, and I will never forget that as long as I live, because imagine wearing those crazy overcoats that somebody designed, all full of tar coal, from the engine. It just kept coming through the windows. Our faces were black. And we hadn't eaten, we hadn't had anything to drink, and here we are on a railroad siding next to a whole bunch of pigs. And the smell was unbelievable, but it was hard to tell which was worse, us or the pigs. It was that bad. And then finally, somebody got an old train car that had a kitchen. Had a regular stove, it was a real cold stove. And they were going to cook for all these guys. There were 410 men going to Oklahoma, and all starving, all mad as heck, and they wouldn't let us off the train either. And you want to see the toilet facilities. It was really unbelievable. And they finally got us some sandwiches and things, and then we continued on. It took, I think, 5.5 or 6 days to get to Oklahoma. And when we got there, they shunted us off to a railroad siding right next to the camp. First thing we saw was some cowboys, it was unbelievable. Because here we are, city boys, all city boys from New England. And there were officers waiting for us. And one of the officers said, "My God, do something. These guys stink." That was our, that was my introduction to what would eventually be my company commander. He was the guy who said that. Anyway, we did get to Camp Gruber, and it was a beautiful camp. Very, very, very nice camp. And we stayed there for a good many months.
So
and we had our training right there.
That was Camp Gruber?
Camp Gruber, yeah.
Okay. I want to back you up just a little bit. How did you come to be in the Army? Did you enlist, or is there any...
No, I was drafted. I was drafted. And all of the 400 guys that were with me were all draftees.
Everyone was drafted.
Yeah,
Do you remember getting your draft notice? Do you remember, was that a...
Yeah.
You felt it was an obligation, or was it something that you really weren't looking forward to, or...
Well, I wanted to enlist. They wouldn't take me, so I really was. As a matter of fact, I had gotten a job in an office that would have exempted me from going into the service at all. It was a tool shop, and we had started long before the United States got into the war. We were making tools for the European allies. And one of my jobs was working in the office, and a part of my job was to deliver pots and tools and stuff that we were made. We had the best machinists in Connecticut working in that shop, and they worked constantly. And I used to have to get that stuff up to Hartford, where, believe it or not, it was called the United Tool and Die, which became Pratt & Whitney eventually, and then eventually all this big place, it has become that, believe it or not. And I used to bring the tools and dies and things, and we were really working the war effort for Europe too. You know, we were working hard for them. And I used to have to make that trip almost every day, back and forth, in a brand new LaSalle. I'll never forget it.
And you were delivering parts that were going to end up in...
They all look, yes, that we made the dies and the casts and so forth for the guns and things that they were going to make. Yeah, it was a very interesting job. And my boss told me I would never go into the service, so I quit. I wanted to go into the service. I really...
So you kind of viewed the draft as an...
Well, when you're young, you're a little stupid anyway, and that proved it. Because I could have stayed home. Instead, I made up my mind that I wanted to go into the service, and I went into the service. So, yeah, that was the extent of my working. I only lasted there about a little over a year and a half. And then I quit because I definitely wanted to go into the service.
Okay. So, we'll go back to Fort Gruber. You arrived. Your new commander got you all lined up.
Yeah.
So what occurred there? What was your purpose of being there?
Basic training. And because they had high hopes that they could, the object of having tank destroyers instead of just tankers was to have special troops like Green Berets and so forth. They had all kinds of plans for us. We were supposed to have different type of uniform. We were supposed to have tank suits and stuff. Some of it we got. The training was fierce. It was really, really tough. I mean, they meant it when they wanted us to be, and believe it or not, I was in the States training for almost 2 years. And went through 3 or 4 different types of training, because they kept changing what we were supposed to do as tank destroyers. And somewhere in the line, of course, I don't know whether anybody's going to be happy to hear me say this, but somewhere in the line, the original intent got lost. And my group especially, we went down, we got, I think they were called M10 tanks. They were supposed to be specially designed for tank destroyers. But they took them away from us right away and changed the outfit and back into training again for something else. And they gave us half tracks with a gun mounted on the half track over the windshield, and that only lasted a short while. They decided they had too many of those already. So now they were going to do something different. But in the meantime, they had let us keep training again, keep training. And we went through that obstacle course over there in Texas. That was a dilly. And because we were supposed to be special troops, we went through it twice. Once was enough for anybody.
Was it a personal obstacle course where each individual went through, or was it an obstacle course for your training with the vehicles, with the guns?
No. You went in as a person. You went. Okay. It was very, very, very difficult. I remember one part especially. They had a wire set over a deep brook, a deep little. It was we'll call it a deep brook, and. You had a wire that you held onto and a wire that you walked across, but it was quite a distance. And naturally, with about 10 guys on there, this is going, and most of the guys wound up in the water. I was lucky; I made it across. But then they told me that there were some guys in there couldn't swim at all and were panicky, and I had to go and jump in after them. I wasn't too sure myself, but. Anyway, the training was very, very difficult. And then finally, when we got over to Europe, we didn't know what our weapon was going to be. And when we were in England, we went across on the Queen Elizabeth. We had, what they tell me, there were 12,000 troops on board. The ship was broken up into 3 separate sections. There was a red district, a blue district, and a white district, or a red, white, and blue. And there were about 3,500 paratroopers aboard, and the rest, and then there was a contingent of WACs. In those days, I think in those days they were still WAAC, and they had a section of the ship all closed off for them. I guess there must have been 300 or 400.
And you're talking about the Women's Air Corps, yeah?
And this was the women. This wasn't the Women's Air Corps. This was the WACs. This were the lady soldiers.
Okay. Oh, okay.
But at that time, they were still like auxiliary. That's what they used to call them because they hadn't really formed that much yet. One of the ladies were pretty rough people. And I don't know why they picked us to be the MPs on the boat. So therefore, I became a sergeant of the MPs. And we were the only ones that were allowed to go from the red section to the white section to the blue section. Because we were MPs now. And some of the greatest experiences I ever had were, now we had 3,500 paratroopers, and those kids were nuts. They were handsome, strong, good-looking kids, but they were tough. So at night, our job was to keep them out of the wax quarters. And now you'll know why, to this day, I'm against having ladies and men in the same army. But, so I would, here I am, I'm a sergeant, I got a 45 strapped to my side, and I got to walk in there where these kids are having a party, they're having a ball, and I'm going to walk in there and tell them, get out. Well, they pick me up. I'm not going to shoot them, that's for sure. They pick me up, throw me out. So I figured the best thing for me to do is to go in and see one of their officers. So I go in and I see this lieutenant, and I said, "Lieutenant, I'm sorry, but your men are creating quite a disturbance, and the young ladies are helping them out." I said, I would send my men in there, but they'll kill my men. So he said, "You did the right thing, Sergeant." He says, "I'll come with me and we'll take care of this right now." And we went into the back quarters, and the minute they saw that lieutenant, somebody yelled, "Tench hut," and everybody, no matter where they were or what they were doing, stood straight up. And the lieutenant looked at him and started swearing. And he said, "Now I give you 3 minutes. 3 minutes to get back to your quarters. Anybody that's not back in his quarters in 3 minutes, you know what's going to happen." Now, you never saw anything like it. Of course, the girls kept saying, "No, no, 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 no." You know, they were having a heck of a time. That was one of my first experiences with what I call combat. It was terrible. But the rest of the trip was really something, because there were 12,000 troops who ate twice a day. And if I'm going too far and getting into too much, you let me know.
Fine.
I'm enjoying myself. I'm reminiscing. I can't help it. It was fun. Anyway, there were 3 sections, so you ate in sections. And the cooks started to make, say, the eggs for tomorrow morning. They would start making them as soon as dinner time was over, and they got cleaned up, say about 9 o'clock. They would start making fried eggs, and they had a stove across the room, this part of the room. Now, there were 3 kitchens, by the way, red, white, and blue. And they had these, and they would put the egg, they had their backs to this big wall that was over here. And there was a stove that ran the entire length of the kitchen. And somebody would bring cases of eggs and keep stocking the cases of eggs there. And one guy would just be taking out eggs, putting them next to the cook. The cook would take the eggs, rack them down, all the way down. And that must have been 20 cooks. And they all had a spatula. And when they thought the eggs were good, they turned them over one time, picked them up, and then threw them over their shoulder against the wall, and they landed on a table against the wall. Now imagine the poor guys who were last to eating those 9 o'clock eggs.
Yeah.
You talk about rubber, you know. And the reason I got to see all this is because as Sergeant of the Guard, I had privileges. I could go down and get a hot cocoa in the kitchen during the night. See, that's the only reason I saw all this, you know. And then when they got through with breakfast, the minute they got through with breakfast, then they started with tomorrow's dinner, not lunch, because you didn't get any lunch. And that's when I went out and bought me they had a canteen, like, you know, and I bought myself a great big box of Snickers, which I love even today because of it. And instead of eating those eggs, and then for dinner, they had fried tomatoes. And they did the same thing with the fried tomatoes they do. It was really something to see. Now, thank God, the Queen Elizabeth didn't rock too much. We did catch a little bit of tough weather, and a few guys got sick, but it wasn't, you know, too bad. It wasn't like my trip home. But the Queen Elizabeth was pretty well stabilized, and we were there in 5.5 days. No escort, just us in 5.5 days. And if you went to the fantail in the back, you actually saw that the wake change every so many seconds. They would actually change so that they were wobbling in the water so that the submarines could not get and she was fast. I don't know if it's true or not, but they used to tell me they had like 45 knots, which in those days was really fast, you know. And they never lost one of the Marys, you know, Queen Mary, Queen Elizabeth. And they were going back and forth. They were bringing 10 and 12,000 troops at a time over there. We landed in the Firth of Scotland, believe it or not, on the 6th of June, which was D-Day.
Oh, okay.
And we were on the boat listening to the battle that was taking place in France. And we were in the Firth of Clyde, Scotland. And we were held up for quite a while. And so we heard a lot of the battle that was going on, the excitement of men that were getting killed, and it kind of woke us up a little bit. Believe me, it scared us a little bit too. But then that night we got off. They had a packet, and then we got down into that boat, and they brought us to Scotland, and there was a train waiting for us. This train that took us to England. I'm trying to Macclesfield, England. Macclesfield.
Macclesfield?
Yeah, Macclesfield, England, which is about I guess about 60, 70 miles from Manchester. And they were all what do they call them? Those Quonset huts? Is that what they call them? Those long.
Mm-hmm. Long round the top.
Yeah, and my company had 4 of those, and it was only Company A that was there. Everybody was in a different company. And this is where my organization suddenly was. Of course, we were only a battalion, by the way. We were never a regiment or a division. We were always a battalion. We sometimes got attached. We were attached to different armies as we went through. At that time, I think we were the 1st Army. And but right there was where my company, Company A, got detached from Company B, C, and what I forget what they call them. But anyway, and we went to Macclesfield, and we were in Macclesfield for about 2.5 months, I guess. Yeah. And then from Macclesfield, we went to Wales, we did training. All of a sudden they changed us, and before that, they had to equip us because they took away all of our weapons and things. So now they had to equip us, and I was chosen as one of the guys to go and find the new materials that we're going to have. And I went to this depot that had to be probably the size of New Haven. And there were weapons, no matter where you looked. There were tanks, there were every kind of weapon you can imagine, as far as your eye could see. As a matter of fact, you couldn't see as far as the weapons were. It was enormous. And there they gave us half tracks, only there was no gun on them. And then they take us to another place, and they gave us towed guns, towed 3-inch guns, which nobody had ever seen before, which actually were Navy weapons that were discarded. And somebody got the bright idea of putting the Navy weapon on a carriage. And all of a sudden we become towed gun artillery instead of tank destroyers. And from then on, the action that I saw was usually somebody else firing and me not being allowed to fire. We we stayed in England for 2.5 months. We went to Wales for training. We went down to, and then we got on a boat. And we went across to France after 3.5 months. We were pretty good on those weapons, though. The crews were excellent. In my case, Sergeant Lowe, who was my platoon sergeant, we had some incorrigible guys. Like every organization, you have a half a dozen guys that are really incorrigible, and you know, they just can't be trained. They can't be doing anything. So Sergeant Lowe decided, what's the sense of us wrecking 4 crews? Celentano's got the most patience of any of the sergeants, so we'll give him the crew with all the incorrigible guys. This is a career, believe me. And so I caught. They were tough when they went to camp. When they got out of camp, you know, they loved to drink. They could find liquor anywhere, no matter where we went. I don't know how, but they always found liquor, and they loved to drink. They loved to kid around and fool around, and I guess I did have pretty good patience with them. But anyway, so they became my crew, and we trained and trained and trained, and it was something new because now we had to get out of the weapon, out of the half track. We had to jump to the ground. We had to disconnect the gun from the field. Previous to that, they were right on our tracks, you know, and they became pretty good crew, a very, very good crew. They were tough to take care of when they were off duty, but when it came time to fight, they were pretty good men. But we went across to France, and then we got another job. We became connected to intelligence. They used to have teams of really well-educated people, scientists. Each had his own field of speciality. We had some people that, for instance, that knew a lot about weapons. We had a few people that, some people that, and they didn't necessarily have to be American. They could have been British officers or French officers or American, and they all wore a particular type of outfit, which meant that they had to be, we had to protect them because we were, the main troops would be on the front lines fighting, and we would be right behind them. And the minute they cleared, say, a mile, we were in that mile, and these guys started their work. They knew what they were looking for. They were sent to certain sectors to find different things. As an example, there was a rumor that Hitler had found some way of making a lighter than aluminum metal. And they were doing it, I think, in France. And, of course, you know, Hitler had taken most of France away. And so it was our job to protect these guys. And so they'd be working inside the battle. Believe it or not, later on, we actually were protecting them with the battle still raging in that same factory. At the end of that factory, we were protecting these guys up front. And it was a very interesting, very, very interesting work. Thank God we never got hurt, but it was very, very interesting work. But we started, here again, I think I just jumped ahead of myself a little bit. When we went across the channel, we arrived at Utah Beach. And the big battle had been about 45 days before, where they, you know, jumped off. So there was an awful lot of stuff still in the water, boats that had been capsized, you know, even a few little bodies would come up every once in a while. We hit the shore, and then they told us that we were going to be we were going to go to Cherbourg, and that the unit was going to be stationed, but only Company A, only my company. 60 men, 120 men, I think. And I wasn't going to be able to go to where we were going to be billeted, because I had been selected with my crew to protect the what do they call it? It was a hill in Cherbourg, and Hitler, or the Germans really, had continued the Siegfried line through the Maginot line all the way to Cherbourg, where the water was. He had, what the French did was ridiculous, because they overran it in no time at all. So the Germans just connected the entire thing and made it all the Siegfried line. And this mountain that we were supposed to protect was loaded with weapons. And you could go from the top. The Germans were so far ahead of us, it's unbelievable that we won the war. Because you go to the top of the mountain, and there was an elevator that would take you down 7 stories into the ground. And every story, every level would have more weapons, different kinds of weapons. And right down at the bottom, you should have seen the torpedoes that they had, all up on racks. Some of them were almost the size of this room, in length. Unbelievable. I mean, it was, and of course, being sergeant, see, once I got the guys in place, then I was able to walk around and look at things, and I was free. I was free to do anything I wanted. So I'd climb up to the top and go down to the bottom, and it was fascinating, absolutely. And from Cherbourg, you could see why they fortified it like they did, and what it took to win that part. That had a fortress. To this day, I can't believe that we were able to overcome them. I mean, I still don't know, because the Germans had so many years ahead of us in what they did. And it was just absolutely fascinating to be able to realize that those guys with grappling hooks and things, they managed to get up on that thing. Of course, there were a lot of land on the bottom. There's no question about that. That was very, very, very sad to realize that what it took. It was a mighty effort, but what it really took to make that all come true. And of course, we were on the perimeter of it, and we weren't in it. So to us, it was really astounding that they did it at all, because we could actually picture it the way it was happening. Well, we were there for, I don't know, maybe a month, and then we started moving forward. It was we were from St. Mary Lease was the first town I remember, and I remember I went by what looked like a jewelry shop, and it was down in the basement, and there had one ring in the window, one ring. And it was a silver ring with a blue stone in it. And so I said, I want that. And I went in, and the guy looked and said, no, he said, no, I don't want to sell that. I said, yeah. He said, besides, you have to have silver, because in order for me to sell you the ring, I have to make another ring, and I need the silver. I don't have any silver. I said, I have silver. I have all the coins from London, the half crowns and so forth. And he said, oh, that's good. That's good. So I said, how much do you want? And I forgot how much I paid for it. But somewhere in this there's a silver ring with a with a blue stone that I brought home with me from there. But that was in St. Mary, Greece. I'll never forget it. Then after that, we went from there, and we kept going. Our next big stop was about a month after they knocked out Low. They
knocked out what now?
San Low. And when you got to the town, you looked out, and there was nothing standing, nothing, absolutely, except a theater wall that had a balcony attached to it. And the only reason it didn't go down was because when it came down, the front part hit the ground and the wall stayed up. It was like this. Mm-hmm. And that's the only thing that was standing in St. Louis. It was completely torn apart. And no people. You know, we went to other towns that were knocked out. There were always people that stayed, and now they were foraging around to see if they could find something to eat and so forth. In St. Louis, nobody. Not a soul. And they used to have to come and bring, we were going to stay there for, I think, a week. And they used to have to bring us food with the truck. You know, they had the trucks, the stoves on the truck and everything. And and we would go looking for different things there. But I'm trying to remember where we went after that, after St. Louis. It wasn't too long. We weren't in France for too much longer after that. We followed. I got into Germany before and then I got out of Germany and had to go to Belgium for the Battle of the Bulge. So I did it backwards. I went into the enemy's country and stayed there for a while. Then I had to come back out and go to Belgium because we were so many things that happened to us. I'm going to stop for a minute and get a drink. At about this time, from the time we were in San Lo, we had a special, my particular gun section, which usually is one. A section is two guns. So I'm a section sergeant, what they call a section sergeant. Sergeant Hauser, who was a very dear friend of mine and a wonderful soldier, he had the second section. And we were supposed to go together, but for some reason or other, they split us up. And they gave me some coordinates and things, and a map and so forth, and told me that I had to go to Metz. And that I had this team that I had to bring to Metz. They were five officers. One of them was a French officer from Metz. And he was dying to go. He was going to go home for the first time in a long, long time. And he couldn't wait to get there. I'm telling you, this is a true story. So we headed for Metz by ourselves, and Hauser went off on another mission himself. And we got caught in a barrage, a horrible barrage, and we were in the middle of it. The Americans were shooting over our heads, and the Germans were shooting back, and it went on for hours. And all we could do was get in the hole, and I got absolute orders that I could not uncouple my gun even. I had to leave the gun on the half track. You do not do any firing. That's not your job. And so we just stood there in foxholes, and the battle was going raging, and every once in a while a little piece of shrapnel would start, forget that it wasn't supposed to drop. It was supposed to go over the other side, and it would drop to the ground. And So I told the officers that there was a wall, a big stone wall, and I said, your best bet is to get right close to that wall and lie on the ground. Well, as time went on, they were tired of laying down, so they started to sit up and with their backs to the wall. The French guy, he was right in the middle. And I even saw some of them taking out, making notes. It seemed so, very brave of them, because there was, every once in a while there'd be a lull, but then the firing would start again, and we would all be trying to protect ourselves. And all of a sudden, this French guy, his head went down. And I didn't think too much of it, but I realized that it was blood coming down out of his throat. And I couldn't go to him just yet, And by the time we got to him, the shelling had pretty much subsided. And when we got to him, he had been hit by there was one little spot that somebody, when they made the fence, didn't quite lay another stone on top of it. You know how those they make those without any mortar or anything. They just pile different types of stones. Well, a piece of shrapnel went through that fence and got the French officer right across his throat from behind, and it came out here, and it killed him instantly. When he dropped his head, he was already dead, and from the shrapnel, believe it or not, one lousy piece of shrapnel got through the fence and it killed him. And then I think maybe 3 or 4 hours after that, we got up and started moving again, and then we heard that Patton had crossed this part. I don't know. It may not. May be no truth to it. I don't remember. I don't remember reading about it either. And the Stars and Stripes used to report almost every big battle and so forth. So I honestly don't know whether that part of the story is true. But I remember that we brought the remaining officers to it looked like a store, just like a storefront. And when we got up, we had to climb about 6 or 8 stairs to get into it. And when we got into it, the store was loaded with maps of all kinds. And these guys were so elated that they had gotten here, and the Germans had not been able to dispose of all the maps and things. And there were a bunch of women who actually lived deep in the basement, who used to get up, live there, cook, eat, and sleep down about 2 flights down into the basement. And then in the morning they would wash up and go up and be office girls and work in the map place. And most of them were French girls, and we found them there. And of course they were a big help to the American officers. That was a big find at one time. I don't know, I remember how elated the officers were, just the fact that they found those maps. And it made the whole trip worthwhile. But after that, we got off of that duty, and we had another very, very fun duty, except they decided that we were well equipped for quick trips to different places. So they taught us how to use a compass and use it well. Now, the V, I don't know if you know about the V, what they call them. They were flying shells, huge shells, that they could start them in Germany. They could point them to France, let's say. They could do everything. They could even stop them pretty much, but they could not pinpoint them. Mm-hmm. So they would start those things in, I think they call them V-bombs. The Germans did. And they would start them in Germany. They would go over into France. They went as far as, they wrecked London with those same things. The only thing is that they weren't good at pinpointing a target. So when they cut off, they came straight down, and there was no telling where they were going to come down. So that was one of the things that we were going to do now. They set us up in a house that had a big catwalk in the roof, like they did in the old days when they had the schooners and things. And one of our people would be sitting there all day long with glasses and maps and so forth. And if he heard or saw or thought he saw a bomb coming, he alerted everybody. Now let's say I was on duty, and I had a corporal on a machine gun and a driver. The minute he called us, we went straight downstairs into and we take the compass out, and we would start shooting, getting ready to shoot the coordinates of the big shell that was coming along. The V-bomb was coming along, and then we would track it, and we would have, when it cut off and went down, we would know approximately where it was. What they wanted more than anything else was whatever pieces we found of that shell, of that thing, we would have to take and put them in bags and so forth and label them. But they wanted the clock mechanism, because it was the clock mechanism that would teach them how this thing could come all the way over, say, from Germany to France or to England, and then cut off at a certain time, And it was important to find that clock. We never found it. I never found the clock. We found a lot of pieces and so forth. I understand that somebody did find the clock, and it was a big help, but I never found it. And one night when I was on my way to do this, it's amazing. I can't find my way out of a teacup now, and I take a compass and back address and so forth. I don't even remember and I used to be able to find these things. It's all gone. I never had it in my mind anymore, But one night as we were doing this, we're on the Autobahn, and we're way down on the Autobahn near France, and we see a body in the middle of the road, all dressed up American. He was American, there was no question about it. So I had one guy with me that he was a hothead, a very hot guy, and he jumps out of the Jeep and he starts going towards it. And if there's one thing they teach you, it's you never approach a dead body until you know darn well that the body is not booby-trapped. And this guy did, and I don't remember whether it was me or one of the other guys tackled him just in time. And then I remember calling the MPs and so forth. Then we went over and we went underneath him with a knife and so forth. And I think I have the picture. I know I have the picture.
Well, we're going to scan it and put it with your...
All right, we'll see that. Yeah. But the guy's name was Phil Cimino.
The guy who was on the ground, or the guy...
Because the Patriots, they were always around, and they came and they took the body. After it was, cleared that there was no weapons on him or anything, and they took the body, and for some reason or other, they had a burial ceremony, and they invited us to the burial ceremony. And they even said his name was on the cross and everything, Phil Cimino. That's how I know it. And I had a good friend back home by the name of Phil Cimino. And I never found out what happened. We got shifted from there. I never found out whether that body is still there, whether they brought it home, or, But the guy was laying in the middle of the road, and he was dead. He had been killed. Why he was there, I don't know. It was the only body that, and I can't remember the name of the town. But these are the kind of jobs that we had because they had changed us 3 different times, 3 different weapons. And I guess they weren't quite sure what we could do anymore, And several times we went into places and we maybe fired a couple of rounds. That's all. We weren't having any of that kind of action at all. We were having a lot of, which turned out I learned an awful lot. But I wasn't a tank destroyer. You know what I mean? I trained and trained and trained. And then when we went into Germany, we were in a engineer-made foxhole. The temperature was about 15 degrees above. It was so cold, it was terrible. Now, my group happened to be very lucky. We had the tank destroyer suits, and a lot of guys didn't have those things. I don't know if you've seen what the Army uniform used to be like, with that heavy coat. Once that heavy coat got wet and it froze, you were like Frankenstein. You couldn't lift your arms, you couldn't move. You were wet all the time. I mean, it never dried. You couldn't do without it because you needed the coat, and that you couldn't do anything with it because it just was an impossibility. I actually stayed in a foxhole for, about 2/3 of the day, about 9 to 12, maybe 10 hours, in a wet foxhole. I couldn't move out of that foxhole. And in the middle of winter, no wonder I've got all kinds of
So why couldn't you move out of the foxhole?
Well, things were firing overhead. And we were we were not allowed to fire back. That's the other bad thing, see? We were different kinds of troops all of a sudden.
Did you have a personal weapon? Did all you guys have it?
I always had my 45 and a carbine. I was the teacher of my organization. When we were in the United States, I spent more time in school than in Texas than most of the guys. When they had maneuvers, they all went out on maneuvers. I went back to school. I caught 3 weeks of Tennessee, which was worse than Europe. It was so cold and horrible. It was always cold, and those coats were impossible in the middle of the winter. The summer wasn't so bad, but the winters were horrible, And I got sick in Munster, Germany. We were up there. We had our guns set up to fire. We were very close to the enemy, and I said to my corporal, "Well, remember now, it's 2 hours on and 2 hours off, because nobody's going to stand up here for more than 2 hours." It was that cold. It was freezing cold. And so I said, "You pass the word down to the rest of the boys that it'll be 2 hours on. Now, what do you want?" I said to him. "Do you want to take the first shift or do you want to take the second shift?" He said, "I'll take the first shift. You get some sleep." I said, "Okay." So I went down into the hole. It was made by the engineers. That's a big difference, because the engineers would make an opening, and then you could slide down that opening, and you could actually rest your whole body. You know, it takes a while to realize that what you're doing is burying yourself. You know, and then you look up and you see sod. It's a very peculiar feeling. So I don't have to worry about dying because I know now what it's like. But I must have slept for about 3/4 of an hour. And all of a sudden I got a pain in my back. I could not believe the pain. It took my voice away. I couldn't talk. I couldn't do anything. And I'm crawling in this 4x4. I'm actually crawling, and then I'm turning over on my back, on my stomach. There was nothing and I couldn't call him to tell him that I was in trouble. I had no voice. I swear, this isn't even a little bit exaggerated. This is the God's truth. And finally, his 2 hours was up, and he's wondering why I'm not coming up. Now he's getting mad, you know. So he puts his head down in the hole, and he starts swearing at me. It's cold out here, you know. Come on, Sergeant. I gave you a break. I let you go first. Come on. And I can't answer him. Now he figures there's something wrong. So he gets down deep in it. And he said, oh my God. He looked at me. He took one look at me. He knew I was really, really sick. So we were not supposed to use our radios. Each of us had a radio. Each half-track had its own radio. But in a case like when you're on the front line, you're not supposed to use your radio. Well, he's looking at me, and he knows he's got to do something. So he took a chance, and he called headquarters and told them what happened. And they said, you know, he's not responding. He's not responding at all. So next thing I know, here comes a Jeep right up to the hole where I was. And they managed to get me out of the hole, but I'm screaming. I mean, the hurt was so bad. And the kid that was in the Jeep, he was a medic. And they had angle irons outside of the Jeep, like this. He gets me down on the ground, gets me on a stretcher, and he starts saying, do you hurt here? Do you hurt here? And so forth and so on. He says, you're not wounded. You know, it's fine. And then it comes to him. You know what? I think he's got a kidney stone. And he says, we can't do anything here for him except give him a needle. So they put a needle in my arm. I remember that. And then I pretty much went off. When I woke up, they had me on a stretcher. The stretcher went on the angle irons outside of the Jeep. The temperature is 15 degrees at least. And they had blankets, thank God. They had a lot of blankets. So they wound me up in the blanket. And I was just like a mummy, you know. And I was pretty much out of it, though. That shot had helped me out a lot.
Morphine or?
And we drove in that cold weather. It was like not having blankets on, believe me. And talk about, it was killing me. And finally I screamed and I told him, you got to do something. He came back, gave me another shot. The next thing I know, I'm lying in a tent, water on the ground, but my stretcher is on pegs. I managed to pick up my head, and there must have been about 8 other guys in there. Some of them were bleeding, and some of them were all shot to pieces. And I realized these guys are wounded. I'm not wounded. I just got... And I said, you know, you got to do something for me. He said, no, I know. And he said, I'm going to knock you out. and then you'll go on the plane. But we can't get you up there because of the weather. We can't. There's the plane right there. He says it's just sitting there, and we've been waiting all the last 2 days, and we haven't been able to take these men, and we're trying to keep them alive until we can get them up in the air. And then I woke up. I was in a plane, and every time the plane went up, I went down. And every time the plane went down, I went up. And what a ride. I mean, it was horrible. But they did get us to France. And they alighted. And it was, the only thing I remembered was that I felt myself, I thought I was on it was almost a cadence flight. And then I looked and I couldn't lift my head because they had me tied down, and there was a German cap and right alongside of me. There was a German guy with there was a German cap. I didn't see a guy, I just saw a cap. Then I looked on and another cap over here, and then one in front, and I realized I'm on a stretcher, so I must be going to a hospital. And these are German guys, you know. Well, as soon as we got up the stairs of the hospital, they took the straps off, and I was able to see 4 German prisoners with PW on their backs, and they had put the stretcher on their shoulder, and they were marching in perfect cadence all the way across. You know, you almost felt like you were on a boat or something. And I got into the hospital, and they immediately went to work on me. And I remember the doctor saying, you know, we know nothing about kidney stones. He said, but we'll find out. And then a woman doctor came in, and but it took a month and a half, something like that, before I finally got out of the hospital. And when I got out of the hospital, they put me in a replacement depot, and they didn't know where my outfit was. Here I am in France, they're telling me my outfit's in Germany. We just, you know, we just couldn't figure it out at all. And I got lucky, and I went to Paris. They couldn't find my outfit. They wanted to send me home. I didn't want to go home. I said, no, I definitely want to go back to my outfit. So instead of spending a short time, I was there 3 months. So in order to give us a break, they would send us to Paris. You know, it was tough duty. And but I got an experience there. You want to hear it? It's not it was a kind of a crazy experience that I ran into. I got to Paris, and I realized I don't have any money. Here I am in Paris. I don't have any money. I've been to the hospital. I don't even know where my clothes are. I don't know where anything is. You know, it's all back there. So I saw a GI, and we were on the trip to Paris. This GI was sitting next to me, and I said, I'm going to Paris. I have no idea what I'm going to do there. And he said, go to the PX. You probably got rations coming. I said, come to think of it, I had no rations for over 3 months. We used to get cigarettes, Hershey bars, soap, you know. So I go to the PX, and I said, my name is Loius J, Celentano, and so forth and so on. Told him who I was and where I was from and so forth. And the guy said, wait, I'll take it. And he went through a bunch of papers and things. He says, you got a pile of rations coming. You know that too. He says, are you a drinker? I said, nah, it doesn't bother me. That's one thing I never got into. He said, you smoke? I said, oh, definitely, I smoke. He said, well, I'll tell you, you should be able to stay in Paris for quite a while. You got quite a ration coming. They gave me about 4 bottles of liquor. They gave me about 10 cartons of cigarettes. This was all had filled itself up because I didn't get any all that time. They gave me chocolate. They gave me soap. They gave me a whole pile of other things. So I said, gee, that's great. No, I started out of the PX where they gave me all this stuff. I started out. I had 2 bags full. And there was a guy standing against the wall. And as I'm walking out, he says, hey, Paisan, come over here. I'm in Paris. What's with this Paisan stuff? I said, how do you know I'm Italian? Oh, he said, I spot him a mile away. So he says, I'm from Naples. I said, well, I'm not. I'm from the United States. But my father's from Europe. So he said, okay, let's talk some business. Now, I swear to God, I've always been a little bit naive in my life. But this was a riot. I said, what are you talking about? So he says, come on. We have an aperitif and we talk. We go sit down. He orders 2 aperitifs. And he said, now you got cigarettes, right? You got cigarettes. You can't smoke all those cigarettes. How many you got? I said, I got a lot. Okay, $20 a carton. I said, are you serious? He says, no, okay, 25. I said, I got 10 cartons. Oh, that's good. $25 a carton. Oh, he puts it down. 10 cartons, $25 a carton. Now, you got chocolate, I'm sure. Yeah. I says, how many you got? Oh, I said, I got a lot of chocolate. He must have 15 bars at least. He said, 15 bars, huh? Pretty good. $10 a piece. I said, for a bar of chocolate, $10. Yeah, don't worry. Put it down. Most of all, he said, how's the soap? It was octagon soap. Remember those bars of soap that they used to have? They used to wash clothes with in the old days. Yeah. Rough soap, you know. It was $5 a piece he gave me for them. I had over $200, well over. I had probably about $300 in my pocket, and that's how I stayed in Paris. Otherwise, I had no money or anything, you know. And they were doing business all over the place. Yeah. This is the seamier side of your existence. And I went there twice. Of course, the second time I had money. I didn't have to sell something. But that time if I didn't sell the stuff, I couldn't possibly stay in Paris. And I stayed about 9 days. Jesus, went to the Folies Bergère and all that stuff. You know, all the things that you heard about. It was really an experience. And I never realized how naive I was until I went to that thing. We were just kids, really. You know, not like today. Kids know things today. Anybody 21 years old knows something. I was 21 years old. I didn't know what the heck I was talking about. You know, it was a different kind of a existence. You learn a lot in the Army. Not all good, but you learn a lot. But eventually I found my outfit.
You did?
It took three and a half months. And I found them by chance. I was standing by the fence, and every night we used to sit with, and there was one guy who was had been a soldier for a long time, except that he was a drunk. If he wasn't drunk at night, he wasn't happy. Where he got the liquor, I'll never know. Maybe he got it from like I did. I don't know. But he was a very, very intelligent guy, you know. And he said, you know what you want to do? He says, stand by the fence. Sometimes they have these Jeeps that go by. You recognize the numbers on the Jeep, you know. And we decided to light the fire by the fence. And in comes this Jeep, and it was Sergeant Politis from my outfit. And I'm screaming and hollering, George, it's me, Lou. George. He wasn't hearing me. So I ran like crazy all the way to headquarters. And when I got there, he was already making, I thought he came for me. And he sees me and he got all low because he and I were very great friends. He got so excited, and I was really, I could see it. I was on my way, And he said, no, I can't take you. I'm not here for you. I'm here for another guy. And I said, no, George, you're here for me. He said, no, I'm sorry, Lou, I can't. And so he said to the captain at the table, he said, can I take him? He said, do you have papers for him? He said, no, but he's in my outfit, he's a sergeant in my outfit. Why can't I take him back? So the guy said, no way. He's going to stay here till you go back, get papers, and come back. So George says, Lou, it may take a while. I said, George, stall. When I see your Jeep, I'll throw the bag over the fence and I'll climb over. And that's what I did. And when I got back to my outfit, my CO was so happy to see me. And he said, but you don't have any papers. I said, well, I'm here. He said, don't worry, I'll take care of it. I need you. So I stayed back there. That was another adventure that